Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. My name is indeed Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm just delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you haven't watched the show before, in essence, what I'm trying to achieve here is a pat on the back for humankind. And what I mean by that is I am constantly mesmerized. I'm in a constant state of awe as to what we, God's creations, or if you're an atheist, just creation, has developed, has created in life. And I look around, and I don't have to look too far. I just go out on my balcony here in Toronto at Shepherd and Bathurst, and I see the magnificence that somebody somewhere developed, created, made for us, for our safety, for our security, so that our city could work well. Some of the things in history that have really, really changed things have been the printing press, the Gutenberg press, electricity, the internet, the steam engine, vaccinations. Edward Jenner's development of the smallpox vaccine in the late 18th century paved the way for modern immunology, drastically reducing the impact of infectious diseases and saving countless lives. These are things that should be celebrated every single day of our lives. We should find a moment in the day, if not two moments, close our eyes and look to the heavens and say, my God, what have we done? This is so beautiful, our world. Now, I'm not naive. I recognize the pockmarks. I do. But I think that if humankind could really fixate, could really look clearly at the beauty of our existence and who we are, that would be a very nice road to peace. Now, in sync with that, I'm really excited to have with me today Sandy Cardin. Sandy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to be with you. And Sandy Cardin is the founder of a new organization, refreshing organization, and it's called Global Jewry. And we're going to talk about that. He's a graduate of Harvard University, so you're pretty bright then, eh?
Well, at least I convinced them that I was back then.
Good stuff. He's a member of the Bar of D.C., Florida, Maryland, and the United States Supreme Court, as well as a senior consultant for philanthropy and impact at Crescent Capital. After a short stint practicing law, Sandy made a big shift. He did so to the world of NGOs. He started at the Mid-Atlantic Director of the Jerusalem Foundation before moving to Tulsa in 1994 to become the first executive director, then first president of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation. And then, as I said, later on, and many, many years ago, in fact, 1 year ago, he created a new NGO, and it's called Global Jewry. So once again, Sandy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you again. It's an honor to be here. I was thrilled to be invited.
Now, you just moved, right? How did the move go?
Move's going well. Move's going well. It's always an interesting time. Downsizing has its advantages and its disadvantages, but we're getting there. And having done it a few times, this is going as smoothly as possible.
You did it with your lovely wife, Melody McCoy.
Absolutely. She's a fabulous partner, and we work well together in making the decisions that you need to make when you have to take certain things out and put certain things in. And it's been a pleasure.
You said she's a fascinating woman. I asked you what was it like all these years being married, and you said she's quite compelling. How so? What is she like?
Well, she has an incredible career. She started out, I met her first initially many, many years ago when she was working for the governor of Maryland. She was staffing a commission on drug and alcohol abuse. That's how we met. I was a commissioner on that commission. And then we remained in touch over the years. She went into the political arena. She served as constituent relations person for Congressman Dutch Rupersberger, who is, I think, retiring this year. After that, she came back to Baltimore. She worked for Dutch in Baltimore, but spent a lot of time in D.C. and on the Hill doing various things. Came back to Baltimore, actually worked for a while with the Baltimore Jewish Council as a sort of legislative liaison for them, during which she had the pleasure of working with my mother, which is another connection that we've had over the years.
Did that go well?
That went very well. That went very well. And it was very helpful when Melody and I grew closer later and became engaged. So that worked out that Mom already knew and approved.
Yeah, your mom liked her.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Good.
yes, yes.
Good.
And my mom did not suffer fools. So it was a very nice situation. Then Melody went on to become a senior leader in an organization called JPIGO, which helps women with primarily maternal issues, but also in the developing world, but also was engaged in many, many other health areas. The whole point of JPIGO, which is an adjunct, if you will, part of Johns Hopkins, is a train-the-trainer model. How do they train local medical people and local people to perform medical services so that becomes very effective, very efficient, very and very cost-effective. She was there for about 15 years or so, and just last year she went and took a short stint at something called the Gupta Klinsky India Institute, where she was basically the connection between Johns Hopkins University and the largest democracy in the world now, India, thinking about how do we help the entirety of the Johns Hopkins University engage with India in better ways as we look to the future. And so she's traveled all throughout the world. She is very worldly. She speaks several languages. She's fantastic. I love her very much.
At parties, who speaks more, you or her?
Well, it depends. It depends on the party. I think we're a good team. We're a good tag team. We don't speak over each other. Usually one of us steps forward. I like listening to her speak because she doesn't talk a lot about what she does at home. And so I learn a lot when we go out to parties.
Now you have 4 children, sort of a blended family, right?
Yes, we do.
And you talk very, very lovingly of your children. What fascinates me, there's a number of things that I find very compelling about your life. I have this vision, or at least had one, about individuals who go to Ivy League schools. Now, I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. U of T, the University of Toronto, is considered somewhat Ivy. My son's starting there in September, God willing.
Mazel tov.
What was Harvard like for you? I know it was way back, but what was it like for you?
It was an amazing experience. I went prior to going to Harvard, I went to a boarding school just down the road from Harvard called Milton Academy. And Milton Academy was known as a place that sent lots of its top students to Harvard. And the year I went, I think I went with 21 others, something like 25% of our class went there. So it was a different experience for many, because going to college, I went with a huge group of people I already knew. Yeah. And I was going to a place with which I was familiar because it was really just down the road, down the Red Line, if you use the subway system in Boston. But what Harvard has to offer in terms of the people that you meet, the education you were afforded if you choose to do it, and the opportunity to have so much fun in Boston, it was really an extraordinary experience. I actually was a student only for 3 years there. I took advanced standing, which was offered back in the day. And so I spent 3 years there and then moved on to law school.
Now, another sort of thought that people have of individuals who do go to Harvard, and a couple of my family members have gone, is that they're very bright. They're very intelligent people. Putting your any sort of humility aside, do you see yourself as a bright individual, as someone who can grasp ideas very quickly?
I think I have a pretty good ability to grasp ideas. I don't know that I think of the people at Harvard, myself included, as being sort of brighter than anyone else. The reason I say that is because after going to Harvard for undergrad, I went to the University of Maryland School of Law, where I came home to be a lawyer with my father and my grandfather.
And your grandfather.
And I can tell you that the people in my law school class at the University of Maryland who were at the top of that class were every bit as bright, if not brighter, than the people with whom I matriculated at Harvard. So there are brilliant people everywhere. Some of us are fortunate enough to win the application game, win the roulette game, to gain admittance to these schools. But that doesn't make us any brighter than other people. It just we won the lottery in that game, and there are brilliant people at every university in the country and throughout the world.
Yeah. How do you feel about Harvard today?
I'm very disappointed in obviously the whole way the issue with anti-Semitism was handled. I think that they're doing the best that they can to try and pull themselves out of that situation. Look, I think it's a challenge in higher education throughout the world, essentially, what's been happening. And I'm disappointed that Harvard has allowed it to happen there. And I think Harvard, as a leading institution, should be doing more to try to eradicate this kind of the anti-Semitism for sure, but more importantly, to eradicate the directives that faculty and try to give students, and really allow students to learn, to have debates, to talk about things, and not try and push them in any particular direction.
Most of your life, or much of your life, you've been involved in philanthropy. I'm going to guess I was also involved in philanthropy for many years. I'm going to guess that people approach you and say, Sandy, I have a chunk of money and I'd like to give it here or there. And, oh, guess what? I'd like to give some to Harvard. What would you tell them today? Give it or don't give it?
Well, I would have problems in the best of circumstances suggesting that anyone gives to Harvard University with an endowment of, I don't know how many billions at this point. I just think that it's a resource. It's not a resource game anymore. I think that those donations that people have that could go to Harvard, particularly if you're not a billionaire. If you have a billionaire, it's fine because you can be giving to other things. But if you're a donor who has to really think about the kinds of organizations to which they contribute, I'm not sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck giving it to an organization that has a billion dollar endowment, whether it's Harvard or any other school. It's nothing against Harvard itself. It's just saying at some point enough is enough, and you can use the money to make a bigger difference elsewhere.
Your mom and dad, they were Jerome and Shoshana Cardin, correct?
Yes.
They passed on?
They're both gone, yes.
They're both gone. When did your dad and mom die?
My dad died many years ago, back in 1993.
Yes.
My mom died, I think, about 5-6 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear it. What were your parents like, Sandy?
Well, they were extraordinary. They were extraordinary people. My father was a very interesting person who was very successful in business early on. Yeah. He had a deferment during World War II. He used to say that he had astigmatism, and back then they weren't sure what that meant, so he was 4F, and that he felt bad about that because all of his friends were being drafted and participating in the war, and he couldn't do that. But what he could do is go to school and then go to law school. So at a very early age, he was already a lawyer and found himself engaged in the real estate business. And he was in a perfect position to take advantage of the GI Bill and all the veterans coming home, and built houses for them, was a pioneer in manufactured housing, and did very, very well in his earlier years. My mother was an extraordinary person. Some of your listeners, if they're familiar with the North American Jewish community, may recognize the name Shoshana Cardin. She was really the first woman in so many roles. She was the first woman president of the Council of Jewish Federations. Mm-hmm. She was the first woman president of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. And she's best known for forcing President Bush 41, to apologize for comments he made about the Jewish lobby during, I believe it was the AWACS discussion many, many years ago.
That was your mother?
That was my mother,
wow.
Shoshana Cardin, who was an extraordinary leader. She was born in Ramat Gan in Palestine in 1926. She and her parents came to the States a few years later when she was very young. She was a beautiful woman. They moved to California. She was a little bit of a model, a little bit of an actress. Then came back to Baltimore, was a school teacher, met my mom, raised 4 children. I have a brother, an older brother, 2 older sisters. And in 1966, she was elected a delegate to the Maryland Constitutional Convention. The Constitution was not adopted by the citizens of Maryland, but that was an opportunity for the world to really understand how extraordinary my mother was. She was on the Today Show as a pioneer for women's credit. She was a leader in making sure that women were able to get credit in their own name. She was also a pioneer in laws for auto safety. She was not a big favorite of my friends because she kept trying to raise the driving age to 18.
Yeah.
But she was that, and then she became very active in the Jewish world and was extraordinary in those roles. She also started later in her years. She also was very influential in starting a community Jewish high school in Baltimore that no longer exists. But she was convinced that we needed a more pluralistic day school, and that would be important for the Jewish people moving forward. I agree with her. Unfortunately, it just couldn't make it happen in Baltimore at that time.
What were they like as parents?
They were fantastic parents. I mean, I knew that I had their love and support every single day. They were not helicopter parents. They said, look, we will make these opportunities available to you, but it's up to you if you want to do it. And take whatever risk you want, no matter what happens, we'll be here if you fall, but it's your life, lead your life and go in the direction that you want to go. And I don't know more you can ask of parents.
What's fantastic is how you were born into a family which seemed to be very growth oriented. There's a lot of success. If you take a look at your family resume, as you just stated, it's pretty comprehensive. Did you fall into that? Were you one of those young people who grew up and said, Mom and Dad are doing amazing things, I want to do that as well, or obviously in sync with who I am? Or were there ever times where you just said, you know what, they're doing their thing and I'm not really interested? What was it like in your head in terms of all the success in your family?
Well, I don't think of it in terms of the success in the family. I think in terms of it as a sense of achievement and contributing to society and doing what you can to make the world a better place. And they did it in all sorts of ways. They started, of course, with their family to make sure that the family was good and that we were, provided the best that we could, the best education that we could, the most opportunities to do that. But it was also the community at large. My father was very active in politics from the earliest of days, and some of your listeners may know Senator Benjamin Cardin from the senior senator from the state of Maryland. Was my father's first cousin. It's my second cousin, and of whom I'm very, very proud. My father was also very active in the Jewish National Fund. He was, interestingly, he was active in the Masons. He was active in the community, helped start the first minority bank in the state of Maryland, and was just active in a whole range of things, as was my mother. Perhaps the best example of how extraordinary my parents were is that my parents were introduced on a blind date by a gentleman by the name of Ben Berman. And they met on this blind date, and they obviously fell in love. They got married. Years later, it turns out that Ben Berman and his wife unknowingly were each carriers of a disease called retinitis pigmentosa, which you can be a carrier and not have the disease. You wouldn't even know. Today, people test for it. Back then, they wouldn't. And they discovered this as their children were beginning to lose their sight. And they said to my parents, there's not much out there. This is a disease that people don't know about. And my parents, with no connection to blindness or retinitis pigmentosa other than the relationship with the Bermans, started what is now known as the Retinitis Pigmentosa Foundation for Fighting Blindness. Wow. And in the course of doing so, they met people from all over the world, certainly all over the country, all over the world, and built this entire foundation. Then they were out, and the foundation has continued to grow and do amazing things. But there was no personal connection to retinitis pigmentosa anywhere in our family. Wow. They did it because this was an opportunity. They were asked, and this was an opportunity. And that's how. And so they didn't say you need to do this. My father did try to push me into politics. I did run for the House of Delegates in the state of Maryland right after graduating from college. I did not do very well. Yes. It was quite an interesting experience. But other than that, they were not people who pushed. They said, you have to do what you want to do. but by example, they made it clear that that helping the world and doing things for society was what to do. So I
Right.
never felt like I had a choice. It was just who I was and
My
who I am.
my father was a rabbi, and he was a very powerful rabbi, an activist. And I felt that I was living under his shadow for a long time. Really, I started to blossom, Sandy, when my father passed away in 1989. So what I was asking you, or what I'm asking you is, with all those credentials and with all those successes, it actually doesn't seem at all like you were under anybody's shadow. It seems like you were moving with the family tide. Is that accurate?
Yeah, look, there was some sense of the shadow, except that when I made the transition from law, and it's a longer story, but when I made the transition from law to the not-for-profit, particularly Jewish philanthropy, the fact that my mother was so deeply engaged was extraordinarily helpful.
Yes,
I
I know.
mean, that's all people needed to know, is that my mother was Shoshana Cardin. And to back to your point about Harvard, I went to Harvard. My mother's Shoshana Cardin. How bad can this guy be, right? So it opened doors, and there were some real opportunities there. But every now and then it was a little frustrating when people say, your mother was a great leader, and that would be the end of the conversation, as if, hello, no, that's the end of the sentence. That's fine. But the truth is, it's not that I felt that I was under a shadow, but what I will say is my mother was extraordinary. And if I feel at the end of my life that I have accomplished 50% of what she was able to accomplish in her life, I'll be satisfied. Comparing myself to my mother, or trying to rate myself or grade myself against my mother is a loser's game. I mean, she was an extraordinary woman, and I'm just lucky to have been her son, and
Yeah.
to have her love, and to be with her.
You were the youngest of the siblings?
I was the youngest. Yes.
Are
I
you?
had,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say, yeah, my brother and two sisters, and then I'm 4 years. I say I was a good time one night after when my parents went out.
I'm the youngest of five, and I am indeed a young child. I mean, when I'm with my sisters, one of them has passed away, unfortunately.
I'm
But
sorry.
yeah, thank you. I go into that place where I feel like, oh, here are my sisters doting over me. Are you the youngest child in your head?
I'm definitely the youngest child in my head. And sort of my role in this family, I think over time, is sometimes it's court jester, and sometimes it's sort of a mediator. Just because we all had very different experiences growing up, and different combinations of relationships with our parents. And I feel that because I was so much younger, 4 years younger than my sibling, next sibling, who, by the way, is another extraordinary woman who you should definitely have on the. My entire family's fascinating, and would be great people for your show. But my sister, Rabbi Nina Beth Cardin, is somebody you really should check into and think about. She's phenomenal, a phenomenal.
Where is she a rabbi?
She is not a pulpit rabbi. She's never been a pulpit rabbi. She's married to someone who was a pulpit rabbi, Rabbi Avrum Reisner. She lives in Baltimore. She's been very active in Jewish environmental issues, interfaith issues, many issues with Jewish women's prayer. She's written several books on women's role in liturgy, expanding women's role, egalitarianism for women in the Jewish religion. She's really something. And so I just see my role sometimes as saying, okay, how can I help bring the family together? Because we all have such different perspectives. And I've had maybe a little broader experience with lots of perspectives. And maybe that's a role I try to play.
Are there Democrats and Republicans amongst your siblings?
There are no Republicans among my siblings.
I like the way you say that.
No.
That's very American of you.
No, I will say to you, I am actually an independent.
Yes.
But there are no Republicans.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Do the siblings get together at all?
We do, less so now that my mom is gone.
Yeah.
We did for a while. For a long time, it was hard because we were all spread out, and it was still hard. But as my mom aged, we made it more of a priority. It's harder now, particularly as we grow older, and our children grow older, and our grandchildren grow older. because there are other family. It's not a question of the family pulling apart. It's the expanse of the family, right? And so there's many more people when we talk about the Chagim and other opportunities. Children want us to come and their spouses want us to go to their parents and so forth. So it's harder. So we are in touch. We are in touch with each other at least once a week. And we maintain that connection, but it's hard for us to all get together.
Well, what I'm loving about your family, and you and I just met, is the cohesiveness of it. Now, when you graduated and began to work as a lawyer, you worked with your father and with your grandfather and your grandfather.
Yes.
What was that like? What was your grandfather like?
My grandfather was, I guess to most people, I would just say he was one tough son of a bitch.
He was.
That's how you would. I don't know. People don't remember, but there was an actor named Edgar G. Robinson, I think who it was. Edgar G. Robinson. And back in the old days when he played the gangster with a cigar, that's how I think about my grandfather. My grandfather was an incredibly bright, capable person. He emigrated here from Russia, from Odessa. He was the eldest of a very large family, and he was the American dream. He just came here and made it work. To this day, I don't even know how he became a lawyer, but he did. And then he started doing things, and I think there's a whole lot of things he never told us about that he did. He became successful. He was the patriarch of the family. He had, I don't even remember how many kids were in that family, 8, 9. And in fact, the woman he married, her sister, so my paternal grandmother's sister, married a Rosensweig. So we may be related. We spelled it differently. The family spelled it differently. And you go, when you're talking about cohesiveness in family, we don't do this so much anymore. But back in the day, my grandfather, and my paternal grandmother started something called the Cardin family group. Before it was fashionable. And that group used to do all sorts of things together. They would go bowling together. They would go to movies together. They would do everything. And both had very large families. So for years, our Passover Sederim were 50, 60 people because everybody from the Cardin family would come for at least one of them.
Do you raise your children like that? Is there a great sense of cohesiveness within your direct family?
I would like to think so. When we lived in Tulsa primarily, and the kids were growing up basically from when they were 7 and 8 till they left to go to college. Really, the highlight of our week was Shabbat dinner. It was an open forum. They could invite anybody they wanted. All they had to do was tell me how many people, and I would go to the grocery store and buy enough roasted chicken. And it was the same menu. They didn't want to check. Every week it was the same roasted menu, string beans, mashed potatoes. Everything was the same.
No cholent. You didn't have cholent.
No cholent. No. They didn't have cholent in the Tulsa Albertsons. And I'm not that much of a chef. I'd like to think I am, but that wouldn't be
right.
And so they would say, I'm inviting, so there's so many of these kids are coming and so many of these other kids are coming. And then it would just be a wonderful Shabbat. And they would hang out and watch, television until they got older, and then they'd get in their cars and go out on dates or do whatever. But that was the way, and so that was where the real connection was for us. The rest of the weeks were hectic. I was doing a lot of traveling during that time and out of town, but basically every Friday we were together, and that's what glued us together. And I'd like to think we're very cohesive.
Well, what is your Jewishness like?
Being Jewish is my essence. It's who I am. I wouldn't even know how to express it. Now, it's so funny because I would say to people all the time, including my brother-in-law, who is very active in the Catholic Church. And I would say to him, I'm not very religious. And he would say, I don't think you understand. You may be the most religious person I know, even though you're not prayerful. That's not who you are. He said, but 24/7, you're thinking about the Jewish people. You're thinking about what it means, tikkun olam. How do you give back? You're using, for yourself, you're using the wrong definition of what it means to be religious. And so that's how I think about my Judaism as my essence. I don't know any other way to think about it.
Do you have a relationship with God?
I do not. Well, let's put it this way: to the if I'm allowed to define God as what's all around us, right? Then yes, I have a relationship with what's all around us. If I'm asked, do I have a relationship with a personal God? Then no, that's not how I see the world. And I think that I am so proud and I think thankful to be Jewish, which is a religion that allows me to think that way,
Yes.
even though it wasn't so great for Spinoza, but we've grown after a few centuries.
So, like on an October 7th, as an example, or an October 7th, would you pray at all, or that's just not part of your vernacular?
I will think about people, but it's not that I would pray. I'm not sure who's going to respond. I feel, and I think my first instinct is, okay, what can I do
Yes.
to help make this situation better? And I hope that the Almighty, to the extent that's the power around us, gives me the strength and the intelligence to be helpful at this terrible time of need.
I hear you. I hear you. So, I'm sorry, I have a very bad cold.
Chicken soup helps those things.
Yeah, I know. We have
That's
some
what
in
I'm
the
told.
fridge. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
about to go there shortly.
Yeah.
You made a leap from working in the world of as a lawyer, from legalities, and you started to work in the world of NGO. Now, I myself began most of my important career, if you will, with United Jewish Appeal. I was there for 7 years, and then I launched a Jewish humanitarian organization called Via Havta. And this was after the war in the Balkans and the genocide in Rwanda. I wanted the Jewish people to really live up to the phrase "never again," and I didn't think we were doing a good job of it here in Canada. And I met many people along the road who became my colleagues in the nonprofit world. Some of them jumping from being a lawyer, others from entrepreneurs. And for a while, it was really difficult because they had been my lay people. And you know how that structure works because
Absolutely.
you come from that structure.
Sure.
And I had such great respect for them because I thought, here's somebody whose world is not money or is not just money. Here's somebody who wants to find purpose and meaning in their life. And therefore, they made a very dramatic move. It doesn't pay as well. It's 24/7. There's a lot of tourists being a Jewish community worker, although there are huge benefits and great rewards. What do you remember specifically what it was that compelled you to make that leap?
Yes, I do. I'll try and tell the abbreviated version of the story.
Yes.
I did not like practicing law, and it's a longer story. But in roughly 1990. 1 or so, I think 91, 92, I was practicing law. The law firm was called Heidemann Cardin. It was my partner, Richard Heidemann, who's been very active in Jewish life. Again, some of the listeners may know Richard. He was president of B'nai B'rith, and he's done amazing work as a lawyer fighting for victims of terror and other kinds of situations. And so he and I were partners, and I really didn't like it. And then one day I had a ridiculous case, and I'll have to clean up the story for a podcast. But some lawyer on the other end of the phone started yelling and screaming at me for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. And I gave him a retort that was very unprofessional. Mm-hmm. I didn't come straight at him. I thought it was pretty funny, but he actually took great offense at it. And I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. That was terribly unprofessional of me. And I used to joke and I tell people, when Martindale Hubbell, the directory of lawyers, called me one day and said, you are the unhappiest lawyer in the entire directory, it's probably time to leave. And what I realized was at that time, I was doing a lot of volunteering for the Associated in Baltimore and other B'nai B'rith and other organizations. And when you're a volunteer, you spend a lot of time at breakfast meetings and a lot of time in the evenings.
Correct.
And I realized that I was having much more fun from 7:30 to 9:30 and from 6:30 to 8:30 than I was during the day. And this made no sense. Like, I needed to reverse this. I needed to reverse, and I wanted to be doing something during the day that I really enjoy. And it turned out that was the not-for-profit world, giving back, doing something for purpose, all the rest of it. And I decided that's it. And I called my partner and I said, here's my 50% of the firm for, $1 for the stock certificate. And I love you. I think it's great, but this isn't for me. And
well, what didn't you like about it, Sandy?
Well, I think that people are just too litigious. Yeah. Okay. And they're not, it is completely consistent with what I'm doing today. I've been the same person. I don't like conflict. And if you don't like conflict, being a lawyer is really not a great profession.
Not good.
Okay. So, because at the end of the day, that's what happens. You can be a real estate lawyer. You can do things, a corporate lawyer, where I would never be a domestic attorney. Okay. And I would never really be a litigator. Okay. Because that's just conflict all the time.
Yes.
But even the other realm, most of the time, conflicts arise. And I just didn't want to be in a situation where I was in conflict. There were also other things that I didn't like about it. And now remember, by 1991, 92, I wasn't practicing with my dad and grandfather anymore. It was fine when I was working with them. I could deal with it because there were other things that were happening, and it was a family thing. But if I had to make my living and career as a lawyer without them in a new situation, wasn't for me.
Has it helped being a lawyer?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
How?
Oh, for sure. The legal education is always extraordinarily helpful. It assists in the way you look at things. It helps you in your terms of your analytical skills. Mm-hmm. Going through law school also generally helps you improve your writing skills, your oratorical skills. I think law school is a phenomenal teacher of many, many things. Actually, law school probably does a better job teaching other things than the law. The law is what it gets the worst, right? Because by the time you come out, from the book, but that's not really what the legal world is about. I mean, I understand how the system works, but then you have to go out and practice, and that's when you really learn what the legal field is about. But in law school is a great, great training ground.
So in the world of NGO, had you found yourself sitting across the table in a difficult situation and saying, hey, look, I'm a lawyer too?
Not so often, because particularly in the NGO world that I've been in, people, you're almost always dealing with people who are passionate and caring about what they're doing. They're people who tend to be, I think, more empathetic than others. They're generally more, particularly when you're in the Jewish philanthropy world. I mean, hopefully there's that Jewish piece in there that they don't forget. Yeah. So you're sort of all in this together, hopefully. And so conversations would never rise to that level. I'm sure it happens, a couple of times in tough negotiations. I think my toughest negotiation was probably with someone also who's pretty well known, former senator from Oklahoma, David Boren, who left the Senate and became president of the University of Oklahoma. And when I was at the Schusterman Family Foundation, Charlie Schusterman of blessed memory made a very significant gift to the University of Oklahoma. And I was negotiating the terms of the grant. And that, it wasn't heated, but it was tough. David Boren was a negotiator with world leaders. He knew how to negotiate. So he won at the end, the negotiation, but what he did afterwards was above and beyond what he promised. So it was quite an experience.
You've been at some fascinating tables.
Amazing tables with amazing people. I mean, the opportunity certainly it started with my parents. My parents, through their political career, Hubert Humphrey is one person, Abraham Ribicoff. These people were in my living room as I was growing up as a little boy. So I was used to being around people who were of great significance. In the law, I met some fascinating people too. In between the law and Schusterman, I did major gift fundraising. for about a year and a half. And you're obviously talking to the very wealthy people who are very successful and fascinating. And then as part of a major billion-dollar foundation, you definitely meet people. And I met, among the wealthiest and most successful of the Jewish community during those years. Edgar Bronfman, Leslie Wexner, just names that, household names, and enjoyed it and learned a lot from them.
What was the biggest gift you ever got?
The biggest gift I raised was $1 million. I was very proud of that. I raised $1 million from the Weinberg Foundation for the city of Jerusalem. I worked for Teddy Kollek, the amazing, remarkable mayor of Jerusalem, and
the Jerusalem Foundation. Yeah,
the Jerusalem Foundation, Karen Yerushalayim, and raised $1 million. The largest gift was $1 million from the Weinbergs for something in Jerusalem.
So you were good for you. I went for my $1 million, and it only came into my organization after I left.
So, it still counts. You laid the foundation.
Still counts. Yeah. So you're at a conference, and you're hobnobbing a bit, and you come across a couple, Charles and Lynn Schusterman, and this is in 1994. And these are a very successful family, individuals who are involved in business and highly philanthropic in their heart and soul. They made a decision somewhere early on to give the money that they made, up to 70% of it, to charities. And they did so, and they're well known for it. You became the director of their foundation, later on the president. What were Charles and Lynn like as people?
They were wonderful people. The Charlie Schusterman was brilliant. He was tough. And he was sort of, the exterior was rough, but if you could get past that exterior, he was as loving and kind and caring a person as I have ever met. I actually didn't think I would say probably the highlight of my experience with the Schusterman Family Foundation was the relationship that he and I developed. Because when I went there back in 1994, I did not expect that. I thought it would be a good working relationship, but there'd be distance, because he was not somebody who pulled people in. His family for sure, and his friends, but outside of that. And so over the years, as we grew together, as we worked together and grew closer and closer, it was really an extraordinary relationship. And it was tragic in every respect when he passed away in 2000. It was not completely unexpected, because he had been diagnosed with chronic myelogenous leukemia years before. But what made this very particularly tragic was he took sick in the last, what turned out to be the last 6 to 8 weeks of his life, the day before he was going to go to MD Anderson for to begin a treatment that we thought was going to prolong his life by another 10 or 15 years. And so it's just an awful, awful, tragic situation that was already bad, and this made it worse. Lynn, it was a pleasure working with Lynn, both during those days when Charlie was really running things, and then afterwards, watching Lynn take control of the foundation after Charlie died and really molding it in her own, the way she wanted to do it. She was a much more emotional, instinctive giver, grant maker, intuitive. Charlie was an engineer. He was, an oil and gas wildcatter. He had facts and figures and data and slide rules and everything down to the penny. Lynn had a completely different approach. And as close as I became to Charlie, my style of approaching the world was much more in line with the way Lynn saw the world. And it was a real pleasure working with her. I only had an opportunity to work with Stacy for a few years, because she started, managing the foundation after she sold her business and all the rest of it. So that was just at the very end. So the bulk of it was with Charles and Lynn. It was a really wonderful experience. And I have to add real quickly, the way they treated my children was fantastic and a real testament to what kind of people they were.
How
They
so?
were,
How did they treat them?
well, they were sort of like the pseudo, grandparents.
Yeah.
We had no family, no other family, obviously, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Everybody was still back in Baltimore, and they just stepped up, and they were helpful and loving and caring, and it was just wonderful. And it just spoke so much about them, the way they were so loving to my children.
What was Tulsa like, Sandy?
Tulsa is a fantastic city. If I wasn't doing the things I'm doing now and back here happily married to Melody, I would want to be the head of the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce.
Really?
It's just an extraordinary place. It is a little pocket of liberal thinking in the midst of Oklahoma and sort of in that whole Midwest area. So it's a very for the Midwest, it's a very progressive kind of community. It's prettier. It has prettier parts of it than most of Oklahoma. It's not quite as flat. You're up sort of in the Northeast. So you have some hills and things. And the people are just genuine and lovely and caring and incredibly supportive. One of the things I think people would be surprised, it's a very small but powerful Jewish community, not just because the Schusterman's there, but there are other incredibly successful and philanthropic Jewish families, even though the community itself in number is maybe 2,500. And it may be counterintuitive to people, but the more obvious outward you are about being Jewish in that community is really welcomed, because they're, by and large, people who live in Oklahoma and Tulsa, Oklahoma, are people of faith. And they appreciate other people who have faith and whose religion is important to them. So while you may think, well, it's a minority and it's complicated, the fact is I've never been more embraced by the general society as a Jewish person than I was in the city of Tulsa. I honestly can't say enough nice things about it.
So you broke your teeth on nonprofit environment communities with the Schusterman Foundation. And if I'm not mistaken, their mission really was to work with other organizations, correct?
Exactly right. Yes.
Is there one particular partnership that the Schusterman Foundation had that you developed, that you adored, that you just remember, man, this was something special in my life, in my career?
The truth is, there were lots of them. Number one, I think I mentioned earlier, outside of the Jewish community, the relationship we had with the University of Oklahoma was really something special. It was among the largest recipients of resources that the family gave. And as I said, David Bourne was a tough negotiator, but he delivered, and he delivered in every way. And the money really made a difference to the city of Tulsa and to the University of Oklahoma. So that's a very special one. On the Jewish side, there are just so many. I think off the top of my head, one that is particularly meaningful is work that we did in the space of children at risk. We were very involved in Tulsa in preventing organizations that work to prevent and treat child abuse. And we took that passion to Israel. And we began working with several organizations there, and then created our own network of homes for abused children and treatment of abused children. And so we started a whole network called Sukkot Shalom, or the Schusterman network of homes throughout Israel. And then we went on because we realized that in order to provide what was necessary to make these homes work, Israel did not have a system of providing all the training for all the different specialties that you needed. And so we created something called the Haruv Institute. And the Haruv Institute became sort of the umbrella, not still working with those homes, with those facilities, but a leadership and training program. Mm-hmm. Then we helped bring Haruv back to Tulsa, actually, to create a Haruv Institute in Tulsa to help both in Tulsa. And the idea was that Haruv would be national, that it would be able to bring some of its training and work nationally in the U.S. It was not as successful on that level as we would have liked, but it still remains extraordinarily successful in Israel. It's now affiliated with Hebrew University. And it was an incredible experience, starting with, we want to help from, and particularly with Lynn. Charlie was very interested in, but under Lynn, it really blossomed. We want to help the most vulnerable. And it wasn't just one place, one time. It became a key element of what we were trying to do. And that was really meaningful.
What was it like for you? What did it do to you, perhaps, working with abused children or organizations that help them?
Look, it was so far removed from the world that I
Yeah,
understood,
this is what I'm saying.
and
Exactly.
right, how this could possibly be. And so it was an incredibly meaningful experience, both for helping me to deal with sympathy and empathy, which I would not say is a strong suit of mine. I'm more reserved, if you will, in that, but and really getting in there and understanding it, and being able to do that so I could be the most effective partner for them, because I was not the most effective if I was still, a hands away. Show me your budget. What are we doing here? How many kids? The details are important, but it was work for me to make sure that I remembered that the details were just the details, that we were talking about human lives here. We're not just talking about numbers moving through. And efficiency and effectiveness is important, but really, it comes down to what people know, the story, the starfish story of the guy. Are you familiar with the guy walking down the beach, and so the person says, "You can't possibly save all these starfish. Why does that matter?" And the person picks it up and it says, "Well, it matters a lot to this one."
Yes,
And throws it back into the ocean. That's the same thing with abused children. We can't deal with everything, but every person we impacted in a significant way.
There are a number of different people and entities throughout our history, the Jewish people, that is, who have made a big difference in terms of bringing us together as a people. And that is a constant dynamic which is required, really, of any people, perhaps more so with us. The Torah and religious texts, one could argue, is very central to who we are and has really played a significant role in maintaining the centrality or the unity of the Jewish people. The Maccabean revolt and Hanukkah, the diaspora and synagogue community, which is huge for all of us, right? Huge for all of us. The Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel, and of course the Jewish calendar and festivals. Now, the reason I say this is because at some point in your life, you decided that there was a void, that there was something that had to be attacked, that had to be dealt with. And that was unity within the Jewish world, more so amongst Jewish organizations. You saw, as many of us do, that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of entities out there doing fine work for the Jewish people, and very often for the non-Jewish world as well, which is what my organization did. The challenge, though, to many of us who are working in the NGO field is that we don't really know who our brothers are. We don't know who our sisters are. So while there may be an organization in Toronto that is working on behalf of the hungry, we know very little about that same type of organization in Buffalo. That's a problem. It's a problem. So you decided that you were going to launch a new entity, a new organization, and to make sure that you would deal with that particular challenge, if you will. You called it Global Jewry, and your mission statement is, it's simple yet profound, you say, to strengthen the bonds that unite the Jewish people. You said that our sole agenda is to create a global platform where Jews of all ages, of all backgrounds, and all perspectives can join together in a welcoming and respectful environment to celebrate our shared values, explore our shared history, and chart our shared future. When did this light bulb go off, Sandy?
Well, I think it's the idea of the importance of Jewish unity is something with which I grew up.
Yeah.
I'm of that age when I was 10 10 years old, and when the war in 67 took place. And I remember sitting in the dining room. I remember the TV's on, and obviously the close. I'm even getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I
The
am too, actually.
the close connection, particularly with my mother. We had family in Israel. The relationship with Israel was, we had little JNF pushkis all over. I mean, it was you were there. You were part of this. There was no sense that was happening somewhere else. That was happening to us, even though we were sitting in safety in Baltimore, Maryland. We were being attacked. We were under pressure and under threat. That's how it felt, right? And so that has stayed with me throughout my life. The notion of Klal Yisrael, we are one people. We have a responsibility to each other. God created us all in God's image, and we have a responsibility to each other. And even more importantly, if you will, especially now, we have a responsibility to society at large. It's not about, as Hillel said, it's not just about being for ourselves, right? We have to be for others as well. In fact, to me and to many people, I think that's really the essence of being Jewish, being the best person you can be, treating others with respect, and fulfilling our responsibility to heal the world, to repair the world. That's what it's about. That's what it means to me to be a Jew. There's so much more, but when you boil it all down, that's what it's about. And I've always felt that when I traveled. I've had the pleasure of traveling in many, many places around the world, even before I joined Schusterman. And there's no question that if I saw somebody with a yarmulke on, I felt like they were part of my family. I could talk to them. If I had a problem and I saw someplace with a mezuzah, I could go there, or I could go to a synagogue. And I felt part of it, even though I didn't know the language. I'd never met the people. I knew I'd get a warm reception.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's magical. It's awesome. I can't imagine being a human being not having that. I feel sorry for people who don't have that sense of what it is to be part of this global people who you have somebody there to support you no matter where you are. You just say, I need help. And they say, of course, right? What else are they going to say? You're a Jew. Of course, come on in. So that's always the way I felt. When I began working in the Jewish community and with Jewish organizations, what became clear is that this was way more complicated on an organizational level. That the Jewish philanthropic world, while it talks about Klal Yisrael and they are businesses. We don't talk about it that way because you don't often talk about philanthropic institutions that way. But think of it that way. They are businesses. They have boards. They have stakeholders. They have constituents. They have responsibilities. They're focused on particular agendas, and they have things that they need to do to achieve them. And they can be, even though they're working in the Jewish community for Jews, they can become fragmented. They can become competitive. They can become narrow. There are so many silos in the Jewish world. We know that. We know, and it's not just because of a difference in religious belief. It's not just denominational differences. It's not just geographical differences. It's not just differences in the way many of us think about Israel, how we engage and deal with our Zionism. It's all over, and there's a base part of it, which is again a competitive kind of thing. And I suggest that that's in part because we forget, many of us, those of us who are achievement oriented and driven to do certain things, we forget why these organizations were created in the first place. In other words, they were created because this was a response to the Jewish condition. To the Jewish condition, right? And this was a particular response. And what happens is people who get engaged in that particular response, that becomes their focus, not the Jewish condition, right? That institution. We need to change that. And the way to change it is to talk about it. It's to understand these realities. People don't, there's not a failure to collaborate or cooperate. It's not because people are bad people and they don't want to do it and they're competitive in nature. It's because there are only so many hours in the day. And when you're focused on making achievement and you're focused on success, you have blinders on, you have blinkers on. And we need to remove them and help people remember that they're in this for the greater good, and then secondarily for their own institution. That is a very tough lift. I understand that. And we're not going to get there all the way. But what we can do is talk about it, and we can make things much better. If I'm not speaking too much, I can tell you a story
Please.
From back in the Schusterman days, which I think it explains this, and it has stayed with me, which is in part where we have Global Jewry. So when Charlie Schusterman died in 2000, obviously he had friends and people who cared about him from all over the world. They couldn't possibly make it to Tulsa, Oklahoma in time for the funeral, given the Jewish ritual of burying someone so quickly. But what they could do is come for the shloshim. They could come. They would know now, 30 days later. And so we had people come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, 30 days after the funeral. And among them were Richard Joel, who at that time was the head of Hillel, Richard Joel and Richard Core. Howard Core. Howard Core, who was the head of AIPAC. Okay. And AIPAC has a nonprofit arm called the American Israel Education Foundation, which is what we gave to because it was a 501c3. And Charlie was very active in creating it. So we had Howard Core and Richard Joel, two of our largest grantees. Okay. Many. I don't know if it was $1 million back then, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Richard Joel and Howard Core both ran two huge Jewish organizations. They were both headquartered in Washington. Their offices couldn't have been more than 10 blocks apart. They had never met each other.
Right.
Never met. Never had a conversation. Never met.
Yes.
Except at a shloshim in Tulsa, Oklahoma on this day because we brought them together. From that point on, it became clear how deep these issues of fragmentation and silos run. And we needed to, at Schusterman, we needed to be a part to break them. Now that I'm not at Schusterman, I'm not focused only on our grantees. I'm focused on the Jewish world in its entirety. Through all the connections that I have and all the people that I know, that's how we've been able to build a network of over 700 people. And now what we're trying to do is facilitate conversations between and among all of them. It's not about the grantees. It's about how do we animate and activate the Jewish world to have these kind of conversations so we can think more about unity and acting as one.
And what is the Jewish world saying to you? Let's have the talk?
The Jewish world, it depends on who in the Jewish world I'm talking to. So far, I would say it breaks down into four areas, if you want. I'll try and remember all of them. The funding community so far, I haven't been able to make great headway. Yes. The funding community, they understand the issue, but they don't. I think they don't grasp the response to it. I think they want sort of an immediate kind of response to this challenge, and that's not the nature of this issue. This is not going to change immediately. This is going to be a longer term kind of thing, and that's not normally how foundations work. They want to know what we're doing today, and they want to be able to count things, and that's not really what this is about.
They want measurables, immediate.
They definitely want measurables, and they want it fast, yes. Right? And that's really not this field. That it doesn't work that way. The second are large organizations that have said we'll be helpful. Let me know. We'll go on the board. We'll lend you our name, and if there's a way we can be helpful, let us know. But basically. We wish you the best. We understand. We've got things to do. Will let us know if we can be helpful. But they're not going to engage because they're busy, not because they don't want to. They understand it, and they want to be part of it. They want to be helpful. So they've been great. The next are the smaller organizations, the more regional, local, some cases national. Remember, we're global. They embrace this. They can't, and particularly outside of Israel and the U.S., any Jewish community outside of Israel and the U.S., they embrace this. They sign on right away because they know how important it is to be connected. And there's so much we in the US and Israel can learn from those communities. That's another piece of what Global Jewry is all about, because their passion, their dedication to Judaism and what they have to put up with to be Jewish, and the fact that they need programs, they need tools, they need content, they need these connections to survive and thrive. They get it right away. And then there are the communities who say this is not what Judaism's about. Judaism is religious, if you will. We just can't. This isn't for us. This is not a thing for us. And so those are sort of the four areas that I've encountered so far.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the middle two have been really supportive. That's how we've grown so fast. 260 organizations, most of the largest Jewish organizations in the world are being supportive and being helpful. And those small organizations and some individuals are really grabbing on, volunteering, and helping us achieve our mission.
What you're saying basically is the Orthodox organizations are not interested. Is that correct?
It's not all. There's no one thing. There are members of the Orthodox community who are doing it, particularly Jewish, the feminist part, the more egalitarian, other parts of the Orthodox community. The Haredi community, it's a little bit. The background for this is that before this, I was spending a lot of time on an initiative called Our Common Destiny. Mm-hmm. And in Our Common Destiny, we did have participation from the Haredi community. And I had hoped that would spill over into Global Jewry. It has to an extent, not as much as I have hoped, but we're not going to give up on that. The door is open to everyone who wants to be part of this, who sees themselves as part of Global Jewry, wants to be part of a respectful environment where we celebrate what unites us. We don't spend time talking about the things that divide us. The door is open. They're welcome. And I'm cautiously optimistic that as we continue to grow and they understand, everyone understands what we're trying to do, that it will be more and more attractive to those who are a little concerned at the beginning.
It's phenomenal, really, what you've done to date within 12 months or so, 14 months.
Well, thank you.
It's phenomenal, Sandy. I think you have about 600 organizations on your board. And
well, we have 260 or a little under 300 organizations, and we have another 400, 500 individuals. Right. So I believe me, I can't thank each and every one of them enough. Because many of them I called and said, I've got this idea. And they said, sure, you can use my name and have my logo. And if you reached out to them today, they wouldn't have the slightest idea what Global Jewry is doing. They just were willing to say yes and say, I support it. Let us know. And when I come back to them now and say, we're trying to do things, they say, wait, what's Global Jewry again? Yes, and I say, all right, let me help you, because you helped get us where we are.
It's very impressive. Some of the organizations you have working with you, as an example, the American Jewish World Service. And I work with the AJWS because we did international humanitarian work. So that is highly, highly impressive. But do you actually have meetings via Zoom or otherwise where 10, 15, 100, 200 people are sitting around the table?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
That'll be fascinating, eh?
So, it's funny that I thought when I started building this that people would be willing to lend their name and their logo, but they didn't really want, I didn't think they would really want to be bothered by me, right? They're busy people and they have other things to do. And so it was intentional that I asked people and said, there's no time or financial requirement for being involved. I just need your help and we'll create this foundation. And as you move down the road, it's an interesting kind of thing. It's a great learning experience for me, because then people say, how come you don't call me? I haven't heard from you. Yeah. And so we do send emails out every day, and we have started a webinar series that we're going to do. And we really spent the first year building the base. We just started within the last 30 days, the implementation piece. And I think people are much more open to engaging with us and spending, hours with us on Zoom or webinars or things than I really imagined. And that's great. That's great news. Now we have to figure out, how do we meet that need? How do we raise the resources that we need to have the people to, facilitating conversations among 700 people is not easy, right?
No, it's not.
It takes time, right? And
Yeah.
it takes people. It's an organization. And so there's a lot there. And so we have to make sure that the infrastructure that we have is capable of meeting that need. We will do that very, very soon. And I'm hopeful that if you ask me this question 6 months from now, 12 months from now, I'm going to say, yeah, it happens monthly or maybe quarterly. We get 100 or so people together. The other thing that we're doing is, we are, with great intentionality, trying to create what we call global Jewry communities of practice. So we are looking and we're really focusing our attention on the partner organizations. And we're saying, okay, who within the partner organizations, where are their commonalities in terms of mission and passion? And how can we be the backbone for them to get together? Because again, to repeat, people don't, one of the biggest challenges of collaboration and cooperation is there's just so many hours in the day. And spending time reaching out to other people without a specific objective or goal at the end of the day often falls off the plate. It's the 11th or 12th things you need to do, and you've listed 10. If we can play that role for people, if we can be the connector for those organizations, and we can be the hub and bring them together through communities of practice, people will do it. I believe, and they'll find value in it and they'll appreciate it. But we have to set that up. So we're finding the people who are willing to help lead the groups, and we're establishing those groups. One other thing we're doing is, for organizations that are more regional and local, we want to try and be their emissary to the global Jewish world. Work with us and let us spread your message, your content. The language we use here is we'll help you broaden your reach and amplify your message. And that's incredibly important for small organizations that work more locally with small constituencies. They don't have the time or the people to sort of reach out more broadly, but they have incredibly important messages and programs that are equally as applicable in Sydney, Australia, as they are in Buenos Aires, as they are in St. Louis, Missouri, right? But the St. Louis, Missouri people aren't going to talk to somebody in Buenos Aires or Sydney, Australia, unless somebody helps them do that. That's the role we want to play.
How far has your reach gone? Are you into Canada?
We are into Canada. I am thrilled with that. On our website, you can take a look at our advisory board.
Yeah.
There's an interactive map. I encourage everybody to go to globaljewry.org and take a look. We are in Toronto. We have some great people in Toronto, partners that come from the Toronto community, include the two JCCs. They're partners of ours, and it's great. And their leader is a fabulous member of our advisory board as well. We have an executive committee member, Maxine Finkelstein, who's on our, Maxine. Yeah. We have Mark Gervis, who's out in Vancouver. We have people in Montreal. We have, I think, Ottawa. I think we have Winnipeg. So we want everybody. And so I think we have a pretty good Canadian showing, and we'll keep at it to expand it.
Do you pick up the phone and call all these folks?
That's how I got them.
Every single one?
Just about every one.
Yeah.
That's why it's taken a year. It's a lot of telephone calls. I'll tell you what's been invaluable is LinkedIn has been invaluable. People are on it. They use it. And I can reach out to them via LinkedIn. And then when we have more serious conversations, we can switch to email and then a Zoom conversation. Generally, it doesn't take more than an hour to explain what we're trying to do and what I want to, how people can help. And I would say our success rate is phenomenal. We've done very, very well. Look, we have a lot of people to go back to. A lot of people want more information. A lot of people say maybe not now, particularly given the challenges of post October 7th. And I understand that there are very, very important issues that need to be addressed as it relates to Israel, as it relates to the communities that were savaged and ravaged in October 7th, rebuilding there, PTSD throughout all of Israel, issues that relate to the North. Now, these are all massive massive issues, and frankly, they need the immediate attention, and I would give them priority over something like Global Jewry. What I ask is when people have a moment to think, then they think about Global Jewry, because it's important. But we also have very, very pressing needs in terms of anti-Semitism and everything happening in Israel. So I understand when people say they're tied up right now. I say, okay, hopefully those things will die down and we'll come back and we'll revisit it. I jokingly say I don't think we'll fix the fragmentation and segmentation in the Jewish community anytime soon.
No.
There'll be plenty of opportunity for them to help in the future.
Well, in your best vision, where would you like to see Global Jewry in 5 years from now?
5 years from now, look, this is a crazy answer. 5 years from now, I hope there's no need for Global Jewry.
Yes.
I hope that what happens is the Jewish community, the global Jewish community, finds ways to collaborate, cooperate, communicate. The silos are down. The means of communication, the openness of communication. We take full advantage of emerging technologies, AI, all sorts of things that are there. We were the first, essentially, global people, right? That we should be leading with technology in terms of what it means to be connected, and in a meaningful way, and not in a spurious way, in a meaningful way. And so 5 years from now, hopefully I'll be older and I won't have to do this anymore. And the community will be incredibly better connected. Little more realistic, slightly more realistic, but still a dream, is that ideally maybe Global Jewry, or the logo of Global Jewry, becomes a kind of ethical or moral kashrut, that organizations put on their website a little symbol that's the Global Jewry logo, and people will go there and know that this is an organization that believes in Jewish unity. This is an organization that believes in treating all members of the Jewish community and our allies and our friends with respect and with dignity, and that we value every Jewish life and we value every Jewish opinion, even though we don't necessarily agree with it. So you'd have that little hexture, if you will, of the morality and the ethical nature of what it means to be a Jewish people. And then moving down the list of dreams, this is an organization that is well supported. We have a team of people that are working to continue to build connections, to grow these communities of practice that really help every Jewish organization with a great program and great content reach the widest, broadest audience they can, so that we are getting the benefit of the thinking and the passion of every Jew, that every Jew can spread that message out to every other Jew. Organizations are taking advantage of it. The Jewish people feel unified, they feel connected, they feel positive, and equally, if not more importantly, we are practicing tikkun olam. We are helping make the world. I mean, we need a lot of repair within our own community, but the world needs a lot of repair as well. We want to continue to be the Or L'Goyim. We need to be a light unto the nations. And if Global Jewry is successful, we'll be able to do that in a very meaningful way.
That's lovely, Sandy.
Thank you.
Is there any non-Jewish component to this?
It's so funny. I try to not use the term non-Jewish. I think it's fabulous that we, who are 0.00001% of the world population, describe everybody else.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. There is the initiative is for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But I want to hasten to say that, particularly given the rates of intermarriage and the way, certainly in America, in the United States, somewhat in Canada, but I'm more familiar with the United States, that the Jewish the demography of the Jewish community is very different today than it was 25 or 30 years ago. And so when you have an intermarriage rate of 70, 80% in the non-Orthodox community, that means that within Jewish life, there are many, many people who have different, or come from different faith communities, or have different beliefs, who may not see themselves as Jews, as a Jewish person, but see them as part of the Jewish community. I want them to feel welcome in Global Jewry. So I want them to feel part of the Jewish community, even if they don't necessarily identify as Jews, because they are our spouses, our partners, our grandparents, our children, whoever they may be. And they need to know that they are welcome and they are respected and valued as part of the Jewish community. The Jewish community doesn't have to be comprised exclusively of Jews. And that's the reality. And by the way, I don't think Jewish life moving forward will be successful if we don't embrace that. Certainly in the non-Orthodox community. The Orthodox community will find ways to grow and continue and kol hakavod, and they should. In the non-Orthodox community, we're going to need to be more welcoming, more embracing, because Jewish people from that community are not going to want to be engaged in something that excludes people who are the closest to them. They need to be included. So at Global Jewry, we hope to include them.
Just one last question to wrap things up. It's a little bit out there, but I've been asking my guests this questions, whether they be Jewish or non-Jewish. Over the last hour and 20 minutes, it's very clear that you love our people deeply. And I feel exactly the same way as you. And I come from a nonprofit world. So much of what you said today resonated with me in a very, very deep way, Sandy. And I understand your language. I really do. Knowing what a beautiful people we are, knowing the Tikkun Olam, repairing the world work that we do in Africa, in South America, in every continent around the world. And I was involved in that. We worked in Zimbabwe and Guyana. And the outreach that we do for the homeless, for the poor, for the impoverished, the beautiful things that we have developed for all of humankind. Let me ask you something. Why are the Jews hated so much?
It's a challenging look. It's a challenging question. The Jews have been hated. We've been hated for millennia, and for all sorts of different reasons. So I think some of the hatred comes from just historical.
Yes.
The anti-Semitism has been around for so long because we were different. We had a different language. We did not necessarily we pledged our allegiance to one God. We did not pledge our allegiance to the king of the realm or the royalty of the realm, and therefore we were suspect. We've always been suspect because we respond to a higher power than the human power. So that's back in the and so I think that over time that continued to grow. Then we had the religious challenges. We had the Crusades, right? We had the issues with the Catholic, with Christianity, and our perceived role in the persecution and crucifixion of Christ. The truth is irrelevant. It's the story that's there, and so that I think has continued. Of course, the biblical challenge with what is the Islamic community, the Muslim community from the Abrahamic days. Again, that story, and I think, and up to modern times, there are things that what's happening in Israel now is very complicated, very complex, and easily manipulated. And I think maybe, I haven't thought about it this way until you asked the question, but maybe that's the answer to why we've been hated for so long, is that the stories around us are easily manipulated to cast us in the worst possible light, not in the most positive light. We see ourselves in a positive light. We recognize our weaknesses, we recognize our challenges, and we try to do something about it as a people internally. Look, we fight, we do all these things hopefully to try and make our people as good as we can be, as strong as we can be. So we understand, we see our weaknesses, but we tend, because of who we tend to see ourselves in the most positive of light and to try and share that with our children and our grandchildren so that Judaism continues both for ourselves and for the world at large. The world, however, can manipulate so much around what the Jewish people have been about and the differences that we bring to the world to cast us in the most negative of light. And we know through the media, negativity sells, right? That's what sells for people, not so much positivity. And I think we just need to continue to do what we do. We need to explain ourselves. We need to defend ourselves, but fortunately, we're in a much better position to do so today than we've ever been really in our history. But the only way to really fight against all of this is to continue walking the talk. It's continuing, because in most cases, if you ask people, at least I found, if you ask people who know Jewish people, they have, or have been to Israel and have seen Israel, they have a positive perspective on Jewish people and the state of Israel. But the vast majority of the world has never met a Jewish person, right, and never been to Israel. And so that's a big hurdle for us to overcome. So what we need to do is continue stressing the message. We need to be outreaching into these communities. We can't pull ourselves in. We can't, circling the wagons is not going to help on that issue. We need to continue to make ourselves vulnerable, not without defenses, but to put ourselves out there and to explain to people, this is what we're all about. This is what the Jewish people care about. And to continue walking the talk and doing the best we can. And at the end of the day, if that's not good enough, it's not good enough. We just have to keep trying. That's what it means to be, Jewish people. As I say on our website, and I'm so fond of saying, Sir Rabbi Tarfon from Pirkei Avot, which is so applicable in so many ways, it is not ours to complete the task. Yeah. But neither are we free to desist from it. That sums up what it means to be a Jew. We may never get there, but that we're not free not to try. We have to keep trying. We have to keep persisting. We have to keep trying to make our community better and the world better.
You know what excites me about this interview? An hour and 30 minutes ago, we had never met.
Right.
And the idea that there's a Sandy Cardin who exists thousands of miles away from me, and who's doing what you do on behalf of the Jewish people, and one could easily argue on behalf of the world, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully that gives me strength, Sandy, because you and I both know that there is a woman who lives in Paris, France, who's doing what we do on behalf of the Jewish people and the world, right?
Right.
There's one in Australia and there's one in Ecuador.
More than one, right?
Right, exactly. Right. And doing phenomenal work. Now, in part, that speaks to the organization that you've launched, which is Global Jewry. Let's get to know them. Let's know who they are. And through that, we'll build the strength of the Jewish people, more so the unity of the Jewish people, and we'll do a better job of what our mission statement is, which is really Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. So thank you for giving me that strength. You really have. And I appreciate it so much.
Kol hakavod for what you're doing. I appreciate your kind words, and your expression of what we're trying to do is better than anything I've come up with so far. So we'll talk about having you be the publicist for Global Jewry. That would really boost us a lot.
I appreciate that. And the other thing too was you'll notice that I tap into, or I try to get to know not only my guests, but their background. And I feel like I'm walking away. I can see your grandfather with the cigar in his mouth.
Well, he would be very upset with that, because at 95 he stopped smoking because he said it was bad for his health.
Okay, well, he stopped. I can see your Hubert Humphrey in your living room when you're a little guy.
Well, thank you.
I've had similar experiences because my father was a rabbi. I remember waking up and there was Shlomo Carlebach. I remember waking up another morning, as not everybody will like this, but there was Meyer Kahani. There you go.
That's a challenge.
There you go. But the fact of the matter is that so many of us involved with the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, are so rich in our nature, in our soul, in our history, and through our families. And I think that this interview is indicative of that. And what I'm hoping is that my viewers, my listeners, will listen very closely to what you had to say and emulate it. And they themselves dive into their own passion within Judaism, or whatever it happens to be, toward the strengthening of our people, towards the strengthening of they as individuals. And I think that's going to happen. So once again, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome again. I'm honored to have been asked, and very much enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
And I hope we have another one and I can learn more about your family.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I say, Yisrael Chai.
Like I did, we may be related.
Yeah, we're probably mishpacha.
Yeah, exactly.
I expect to be in the will, by the way.
Yeah.
So,
It's all going to Global Jewry. So what can I tell you?
okay, then I need
Okay.
to be a board of directors. I want to finish with I happen to love AI. You talked about that before, and using that technology towards your mission statement is very wise. I asked AI today to write a poem for me all about unity, and this is what I received. In ancient sands where shadows dance, a voice arose, a guiding lance. Through parted seas and deserts' grace, a people found their sacred place. Beneath the stars and heavenly dome, a kingdom rose to call its home. From tribal lore to city's heart, in unity they would not part. The sage's words, a tapestry, wove laws and lore for all to see, and whispered prayers and midnight light. Their souls embraced the common fight. In days of struggle, hearts were tried, yet bonds and faith held strong and wide. Through wars and trials and darkest hour, they stood as one, a steadfast tower. The dream of lands where freedom springs and Herzl's hope and fervent wings brought forth in dawn a vibrant birth to shape a state, a promised earth. From ancient scrolls to modern cries, their spirits soar beneath the skies. In every story, song, and plea, their unity is clear to see. So let the voices rise and blend in harmony from start to end. For through the ages, through the night, the Jewish soul shines very bright. Thank you again. We look
That's
forward to
beautiful.
being with you. I'm Yisrael Chai. The nation of Israel lives. We will be back again soon.